Tonight, federal agents wage a multi-state assault on the empire of a woman investigators call the Qeen.
The figure accused of running one of the largest illicit logistics networks in the country.
Raids are unfolding coast to coast. Warehouses swept, encrypted laptops seized, and dozens of her operators in custody. Officials say she moved drugs.
Screenplay, Cartel Qeen. For 5 years, American and Colombian intelligence agencies hunted a phantom. Agents called her La Reina, the Queen. A 38-year-old woman who never appeared on law enforcement's radar, yet managed one of the most profitable drug empires in the Western Hemisphere. She carried no weapons, was never involved in shootouts, and was never seen near drugs. Her strength lay elsewhere: impeccable logistics, financial ingenuity, and an army of loyal followers ready to carry out any order. The story began in 2017, when DEA analysts noticed a strange pattern. Several independent cartels in Colombia, which had been feuding for years, suddenly began acting in unison. Their delivery routes shifted, becoming more complex and unpredictable. Interception stopped working. Agents lost track halfway through. Someone had rebuilt the entire drug transportation system, transforming chaotic operations into a streamlined machine. The first real lead emerged by chance. At the port of Cartagena, customs officers detained a container of coffee beans bound for Rotterdam. A scanner revealed an anomaly. Inside the bags of beans, they discovered nearly a ton of high-purity cocaine, vacuum-sealed. The most interesting thing wasn't the drug itself, but the documents. The sending company, called Transports Andina, had an impeccable reputation. It had been operating legally for 12 years, had hundreds of successful deliveries, and had a clean tax record. The company's owner, Isabella Marin Castillo, had a degree in international logistics from Harvard. Agents began digging deeper. Isabella was born in a small town in the Antioquia department to a middle-class family. Her father was an engineer, her mother a school teacher. She was an excellent student, received a scholarship to study in the United States, then returned to Colombia and started her own business. On paper, everything looked perfect. Too perfect. Financial analysts discovered something odd. Isabella's company was receiving loans from banks in Panama, Curacao, and Hong Kong. The amounts were small but constant. The money came in, passed through the company's accounts, and disappeared into a complex web of transfers. Meanwhile, agents in Mexico reported the arrest of a courier carrying instructions for a local cell of the Sinaloa cartel. The encrypted messages mentioned a certain lady who coordinated shipments from South America. Under pressure, the courier admitted he had never seen the woman in person, but received orders through secure communication channels. He knew only one thing: when Lady plans something, everything goes smoothly. The next breakthrough came 8 months later. Satellite surveillance detected unusual activity in an industrial area near Medellin. An old textile factory, officially closed, suddenly began consuming massive amounts of electricity. Consumption continued around the clock, with peaks at night. Thermal imaging cameras showed high temperatures inside the premises, a sign of chemical production. Agents established surveillance. Over 2 weeks, they documented the movement of trucks carrying barrels of chemical reagents, vans carrying sealed containers, and a constant stream of workers arriving for shifts. When special forces stormed the facility, they discovered a state-of-the-art methamphetamine lab. 5 industrial reactors, each the size of a car, were running at full capacity. The purity of the finished product reached 99%. This wasn't a makeshift underground facility, but a full-fledged chemical production facility, capable of producing up to 3 tons of pure methamphetamine per month. 23 people were detained: chemists, security guards, and logistics specialists. But there was no one among them who could be considered the boss. Everyone was working according to instructions received through encrypted channels. Everyone was talking about the same thing. There was someone at the top who was running everything, but no one had ever seen that person. On hard drives seized from the lab, cybersecurity specialists discovered correspondence. The messages were short, businesslike, and succinct. Batch ready for shipment. Route Alpha, date the 18th. Change unloading coordinates. Use backup location. Supplier issue resolved. Proceed. All messages were sent to anonymous servers, their tracks lost in a maze of proxies and VPNs. But the experts noticed a pattern: the communication style, the word choice, the phrasing. Whoever wrote these messages was a person with a higher education, accustomed to thinking systematically and strategically. The investigation returned to Isabella Marin. A thorough investigation revealed that her logistics company owned shares in 15 other firms across Latin America. These included transport companies, warehouses, small ports, and a network of cargo terminals. While technically legal, the geographic reach coincided perfectly with known drug trafficking routes. Agents began tapping the phones of her company's employees. One manager mentioned in a conversation, The boss said we need to push back the shipment by a week. She's always right. This was the first confirmation. Isabella wasn't just a business owner. She was the brains behind the operation. Meanwhile, a parallel investigation was underway in the United States. FBI agents in Miami were tracking money flows related to the methamphetamine trade. Over $5 billion worth of drugs passed through Florida in a single year. Part of this money was laundered through a network of shell companies registered in offshore jurisdictions. Financial analysts discovered that several of these companies had directors who had once worked for fbi&dea, Isabella's company. The chain was complete. The agents began to assemble a dossier. Isabella lived modestly but tastefully. A small mansion in the suburbs of Bogota, an expensive car, but nothing flashy. She avoided publicity, rarely appeared at social events, and behaved like an ordinary businesswoman. But the details gave her away. Regular trips to Panama, Venezuela, and Mexico, always under the guise of business meetings. Frequent calls to numbers that later surfaced in other drug trafficking investigations. And most importantly, the absolute loyalty of her employees. No one ever ratted her out. Even under the threat of long prison terms, they remained silent or provided minimal information. The investigation established that Isabella had her own control system. She never hired random people. Every employee was thoroughly vetted. Many were relatives or friends of those already working for the organization. She paid generously, provided for their families in the event of arrest, and assisted with legal matters. She created more than just a criminal group. She created a community where people were bound not only by money, but also by personal loyalty. The breakthrough came unexpectedly. One of the truck drivers working for Isabella's company had an accident in Panama. The cargo spilled on the road, and local police discovered a hidden compartment containing cocaine. The driver was arrested. He was young, scared, and not ready to spend 20 years in a Panamanian prison. Under pressure, he began to talk. He explained that the routes were always planned in advance, down to the smallest detail. Each driver received GPS coordinates, precise stop times, and contact information in case of problems. All of this was sent via encrypted messages. But one day, 2 months ago, he personally met with the woman who inspected the cargo before shipping. Tall, dark-haired, she spoke Spanish with a slight accent, like someone who had lived abroad for a long time. She identified herself simply as Isa. The driver hadn't thought anything of it, but now, when the agent showed him photographs, he didn't hesitate to point the finger at Isabella Marine. That was enough for a search warrant. The DEA, FBI, and Colombian police began planning the operation. They knew Isabella was smart and cautious. One wrong move and she would disappear. The plan was simple: simultaneous raids at 5 locations: her home in Bogota, the main office of fbi&dea, 2 warehouses on the outskirts of the city, and a country villa she occasionally visited. The operation was dubbed the Queen's Gambit. At 4 in the morning on November 15th, special forces began moving. Helicopters circled over the targets, blocking any escape routes. On the ground, dozens of armored vehicles surrounded the facilities. When the agents stormed Isabella's mansion, they expected resistance, but there was none. The house was empty. The guards were gone. The furniture was still there, but almost all of her personal belongings were gone. It seemed she knew she was about to be caught. The agents began a methodical search. In the basement, they discovered a small office, 3 computers protected by military-grade encryption, maps on the walls with marked routes, stacks of documents neatly organized in folders. This was the command room. From here, she controlled everything. Experts began extracting data from the hard drives. Even with deleted files, traces remained. Correspondence, financial reports, contact lists, names, dates, amounts. All of this formed a detailed picture of a vast organization operating like a corporation. At the same time, a raiding party broke into the fbi&dea office. The employees were shocked. Most had no idea what their boss really did. They thought they worked for a regular logistics company. But in Isabella's office, the agents found a safe. The burglar cracked it in 20 minutes. Inside were flash drives, paper records, and several passports in different names with Isabella's photo. She was preparing to escape. Drug stashes were discovered in the warehouses, nearly 2 tons of cocaine and methamphetamine packed in sealed containers. Part of the shipment was already ready for shipment. Documents indicated that this shipment was destined for Europe via West Africa. The route was ingenious in its complexity. First, the cargo traveled by sea to Senegal, from there by land to Morocco, and then via Gibraltar to Spain. Each stage was overseen by different people who were unaware of the full picture. But where was Isabella herself? Agents checked all known addresses, interviewed relatives, associates, and acquaintances. No one knew anything. or pretended not to. 2 days passed. Analysts combed through surveillance footage, studied cell tower data, and tracked bank cards. And then came the breakthrough. One of the credit cards, issued under a false name, was used to purchase a domestic flight from Bogota to Cartagena. Airport cameras captured a woman wearing dark glasses and a wig. Her gait, her demeanor, everything matched. The task force flew to Cartagena. They had 2 hours before the flight landed. Local police blocked all airport exits. As the plane landed and passengers began to disembark, the agent spotted her. She walked calmly, confidently, carrying a small suitcase. When 2 agents blocked her path, she didn't even try to run. She simply stopped, removed her glasses, and looked them in the eye. "I knew you'd come," she said in unaccented English. "I just wanted a little more time." She was detained without incident. A search revealed a passport in the name of Maria Esteban, $10,000 in cash, and a phone with deleted data. A suitcase contained clothes, several books, and a laptop. An examination would later reveal that the laptop contained backups of all transactions for the past 3 years. Isabella hadn't completely destroyed the data. Perhaps she wanted to retain leverage, or simply didn't have time. The interrogations began the next day. Isabella was calm, almost cold. She didn't deny her involvement in drug trafficking. She spoke clearly, without emotion, as if discussing a financial report. "I built a system that worked," she said. "I didn't kill anyone. I didn't use violence. I simply did my job better than anyone else." The agents presented her with evidence: supply chains, financial documents, witness statements. The list of charges ran 11 pages, leading a criminal organization, large-scale drug smuggling, money laundering, creating shell companies to conceal criminal activity, corruption of public officials. If confirmed, she faces life imprisonment without parole. The investigation continued to unravel the case. Based on the data seized from Isabella, dozens of arrests were made across Latin America, the United States, and Europe. Drivers, chemists, financiers, corrupt police officers, and customs officials were captured. 3 more clandestine laboratories were shut down in Colombia and Venezuela. More than 12 tons of drugs were seized. Accounts worth approximately $800 million were frozen, but the most interesting revelation came later. An analysis of the correspondence revealed that Isabella didn't just run the cartel. She created a fundamentally new model of drug trafficking. Instead of a traditional hierarchy with brutal control and violence, she built a decentralized network where each link operated independently, but in sync. No one knew the whole picture except her. This made the organization nearly invulnerable. Even if individual cells were arrested, the system continued to function. She used modern technologies: blockchain for financial transactions, encrypted messengers for communication, artificial intelligence to predict risks and choose optimal routes. She hired programmers, data analysts, and logistics specialists. Some of them didn't even realize they were working for a drug cartel, thinking it was a startup in international trade. Psychologists working with the investigation drew a profile of Isabella. She possessed high intelligence, strategic thinking, and the ability to see several steps ahead. She lacked emotional attachment to people, yet was able to inspire loyalty and trust. She was a perfectionist, attentive to detail, and most importantly, a complete lack of remorse. She didn't consider herself a criminal. In her mind, she was an entrepreneur who had found a profitable niche and exploited it effectively. Isabella maintained a dignified demeanor in court. She listened to the charges without emotion, occasionally taking notes. When she was given the floor, she delivered a short speech. "I don't apologize. I did what I thought was right. The drug business existed before me and will exist after me. I was simply better than others. The system I created showed that even criminal business can be efficient and organized. Perhaps one day someone will apply these principles to the legal economy." The jury returned a verdict, guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced her to life imprisonment. As she left the courtroom, Isabella turned and took one last look at the courtroom. No regret, no fear, just the calm realization that the game was over. But the story didn't end there. 6 months after her arrest, investigators discovered that several key links in Isabella's organization were still operating. Supplies had resumed, albeit at a reduced volume. Someone was still using her methods. Perhaps she left behind instructions, trusted contacts, and backup plans. Or perhaps her ideas were simply so effective that other cartels began copying them. DEA and FBI agents say the Isabella Marin case has changed their understanding of drug trafficking. These are no longer primitive gangs with machine guns. They're global corporations using advanced technology, financial instruments, and strategic planning. and such adversaries are much more difficult to combat. Isabella is in a maximum security prison. According to the guards, she's calm, reads a lot, and sometimes writes. No escape attempts, no conflicts. She's simply quietly serving out her sentence. But the agents know that somewhere out there, on the outside, there are people who remember her methods, and that means the war continues. A year after her sentencing, an incident occurred at a federal prison that prompted investigators to revisit Isabella's case. One of the guards was arrested for attempting to smuggle illegal items, a smartphone and a flash drive, to her. During questioning, he admitted to being paid $50,000. The money arrived through a complex chain of transfers, and the source could not be traced. This meant one thing. Isabella still had connections outside the prison, and someone was trying to re-establish contact. The smartphone was confiscated before she could use it. Experts opened the flash drive. It contained encrypted files with coordinates, dates, and code words. After decrypting them, it became clear they were instructions for new shipments. Someone on the outside was trying to get her approval or additional information. Isabella was transferred to a maximum security facility where she was kept under 24-hour surveillance. All emails were checked, and visitors were allowed only after thorough screening. At the same time, agents in Colombia discovered that several former employees of fbi&dea had created a new company. It was officially a company for the delivery of agricultural products, but its routes and operating methods raised suspicions. Investigators established surveillance. Over 3 months, they documented at least 5 suspicious shipments. The cargo traveled along the same routes that Isabella had previously used. This was no coincidence. When agents raided the warehouse, they discovered a warehouse containing 1.5 tons of cocaine and detailed operational plans modeled after Isabella's system. Upon arrest, one of the organizers, a former logistics manager, stated, "We're simply continuing her work. She showed us how to operate. The system is perfect. It works on its own." This confirmed the investigators' worst fears. Isabella had created not just a criminal organization, but an ideology, a method that was now being copied by others. The situation in the US also escalated. DEA analysts recorded an increase in the supply of high-purity methamphetamine to major cities on the East Coast. Chemical analysis showed that the product was identical to that produced in labs linked to Isabella, meaning someone had recreated her technology agents located a clandestine lab in Mexico. During the raid, they detained chemists who confessed to having been trained by someone who worked for Isabella. He passed on knowledge, recipes, and quality control methods. The network grew, despite its creator being behind bars. The prosecutor's office tried to use this information to pressure Isabella. They offered her a deal. If she testified against her former accomplices and revealed the remaining channels, her sentence could be reduced. The lawyers passed on the offer. Isabella refused without hesitation. "I'm not a traitor," she wrote in her response. "I built a system that doesn't depend on me. Even if I tell everything I know, it won't change anything. The idea is already living its own life." These words proved prophetic. Over the next 2 years, law enforcement shut down 8 labs, arrested over 100 people, and seized billions of dollars worth of drugs. But the flow continued. Every time one cell was busted, another emerged. Isabella's methods, decentralization, technology, impeccable logistics, became the industry standard. Other cartels studied her case and adapted it for their own purposes. She became a legend, a symbol of a new generation of drug trafficking. In prison, Isabella spent her time reading and writing. She worked on a memoir, though publication was impossible due to a court injunction. A psychologist who spoke with her regularly noted she doesn't regret what she did. She sees herself not as a criminal, but as an innovator who applied business principles to a previously chaotic field. For her, It was an intellectual challenge, one she solved brilliantly. 3 years after her arrest, journalists were granted access to an interview with Isabella. Under strict supervision by prison authorities, she answered several questions. When asked how she felt watching others use her methods, she smiled. Pride. I created a system that has outlived me. Not many entrepreneurs can say that. Yes, it's illegal. Yes, it's harmful. But from a pure management, logistics, and strategy perspective, it was perfect.